and that party is the National Democratic Congress. I want to say a special welcome to His Excellency, the former President. We thank you very much for gracing this occasion. And we assure you that between now and election 2020, CFR has your back. We will be available 24/7, and we will do whatever it takes for us to win power come 2021. Thank you very much. And once again, welcome. Enjoy your stay, and let's have a blast. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable George Lowe. Whatever myths there are about the Ghanaian economy will be busted today, and whatever truths there are will be upheld. To help us do that, we have assembled a cast of eminent speakers who will delve into the issues and lay bare the facts. We have, after all, been invited to come to the table with facts and nothing but the facts. The program would be in 2 sessions. We would first have a presentation made by our main speaker, after which a panel of distinguished persons will shed further light on various sectors of the Ghanaian economy and put to rest some of the nagging issues surrounding it. I would proceed at this juncture to introduce our speakers for the day. Our main speaker is someone who has taken the economic landscape of the country by storm with his incisive analysis of the Ghanaian economy, much to the chagrin of his detractors, but to the joy and delight of all right-thinking members of Ghanaian society. He is the Member of Parliament for the Bogatanga Central Constituency, Honorable Isaac Adongo. Thank you very much. Honorable Adongo is in very lofty company. The speakers I'm about to introduce have been at various points actively involved in the management of the Ghanaian economy and have considerable experience in the endeavor. We also do have in our midst a distinguished woman who excelled at her duties as a Minister of State and continues to raise the flag of Ghana very high, far afield. To help us do the discussion, ladies and gentlemen, we have the Honorable Fifi Kwete, former Deputy Minister of Finance, former Minister of Agriculture, and currently the Member of Parliament for the Ketu South constituency of the Volta region. Thank you very much, Honorable. With him is a former Deputy Minister for Energy and currently the Member of Parliament for the Yape Kusogu constituency, the Honorable John Abdullahi Jinapo. Thank you very much. We also have a former minister, a former Deputy Minister of Finance and Member of Parliament for the Ejumako Enyan Esiam constituency, Honorable Ato Forsen. Thank you very much, Honorable. Unlike yesterday, when there was no female presence at a lecture organized ostensibly to tell us about what we already know about the Ghanaian economy, we have endeavored to ensure a level playing field. We have been sensitive for the requirement of gender balance. And therefore, we have 2 distinguished ladies who are poised to rub shoulders with the men and show their mettle. The first amongst them is a former Minister of Education and currently the Chancellor of the Women's University in Africa and also a former Vice Chancellor of the University of Cape Coast, Professor Nana Jane Opoku-Agyeman. Thank you very much, Madam, for coming. Completing the cast is a former Deputy Minister of Finance Madam Monakoti. Thank you very much for coming, Madam. Without taking any more of your time, ladies and gentlemen, I would invite the Honorable Isaac Adongo to make his presentation.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Your Excellency, I hate to call you former president because you deserve more than a former president. His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, who has become a blessing to the global world. We are privileged to have you because only yesterday you were in Dakar, but because of your love to come back and serve us, you are here today to listen to us. You are welcome once again. My chief whip and my leader in Parliament, the Honorable Muntaka Mubarak, one of those leaders who have nurtured some of us and have given us the opportunity to do front bench duties, even from the back bench. I also wish to acknowledge the leaders and our party elders who have steadfastly held us together all these years. The members of our national executive who are present, also former appointees of the various NDC governments, the diplomatic corps, members of the Fourth Estate of the Realm, ladies and gentlemen, all other protocols observed. Ladies and gentlemen, today is a very important occasion because it is an occasion when we have all been compelled to once again discuss a second State of the Nation's address. His Excellency the President fulfilled a constitutional mandate by coming to Parliament to address the nation and to tell us the health of the Ghanaian economy. Barely before we finish addressing and debating the issues that emerge, we were now confronted once again yesterday with a second State of the Nation's address. Of course, when you have a very exuberant vice president, you would always find competition even with your constitutional mandate. And so yesterday, the people of Ghana were served with what we already knew, that the NPP government, after having done all they could to win power, after having held some of the lectures that we don't even have the appropriate words to describe, are still delivering lectures in government when they are supposed to manage the economy. Your Excellency, the management of an economy is a very serious business and cannot be reduced to comic relief and inciting the public against expectations that cannot be met. Mr. Speaker, whilst the people of Ghana were jubilating yesterday, especially our brothers and sisters who are into imports and are into distributive trade, reminiscent of the days of the first budget of the NPP in 2017, when the people of Abosokan were celebrating the abolition of import duties. I said to myself, this is the second deceit that will hang the NPP forever in 2020. Ladies and gentlemen, His Excellency the Vice President made a number of profound statements that were not supported by facts. And so even as the people of Ghana were contemplating whether it was the economy that we knew or that we have suddenly been transported to heaven, the international community began to give a verdict. And I'm sad to report and to give a word of caution to His Excellency the Vice President not to once again plunge this country into international disgrace. Yesterday, Bloomberg reported that hours after the Vice President made some of the claims that actually frightened them, the cedi reverted back to its unenviable record of being the worst performing currency in Africa. Your Excellency, Bloomberg reports that yesterday the cedi was trading at 5.61 at a time that the Vice President was in Ghana celebrating this abysmal performance and a disgrace to the international community, to us from the international community, because then we have once again gone back to be the worst performing currency in Africa. But this time, it was accompanied by us now becoming the fourth worst performing currency in the whole of the world. Your Excellency, this is a very disturbing spectacle for several reasons. The people of Ghana only recently went to beg the international community to lend us $3 billion. We assured them that with the exit of the IMF, we're going to be very disciplined and that we're going to ensure that the tightrope that we have followed in order to sustain the economy and to build the buffers that they so seriously wanted us to build will be maintained. We had the Vice President tell the whole world that we didn't mean to follow IMF. In fact, it was because of IMF we could not waste the hard-earned foreign currency to support the cedi. He didn't end there. He lied to the international community that the Bank of Ghana did not support the cedi with any funds. I want all of you to take your time and read the summary economic and financial data released by the Bank of Ghana only for the recent Monetary Policy Committee meeting. And the Bank of Ghana reported that at the end of 31st December 2018, Ghana's net international reserves stood at $3.8 billion. It reported that at the end of February 2019, that is 2 months later, our net international reserves became $3.1 billion. Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, where is the $700 million of our net international reserves? Obviously, it was pumped into the economy to support the cedi. But my checks reveal that the last 3 weeks of March 2019 saw an additional pumping of $300 million to stabilize the cedi, all with the aim of achieving an artificial 5.2 exchange rate to the dollar so Bawumia could have a way to deliver a lecture. Unfortunately, the cedi is not the son of Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia and knows where it belongs. So after a couple of days of injecting so much painkillers into the cedi, the painkiller left the system and the cedi is back to the pains once again, now trading at 5.6 to the dollar. Mr. Chairman, the irony of all of this is that we now have a vice president who gave us so much hope, who gave us so much to believe in, that the people of Ghana knew that with His Excellency Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, the Walewale Adom Smith, the Ghanaian economy was poised for the better. So what suddenly... Ladies and gentlemen, the question is, what brought us to this? The people of Ghana were made to believe that Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia was leading a very strong economic management team. And that when it comes to the economy, we were in safe hands. After he arrested the fugitive cedi, or is it a dollar? And my ranking member says that dollar was it a Canadian dollar? Or it was the Liberian dollar. It has finally escaped. Bawumia, unable to answer the questions, then resorted to become the ICT Minister of Ghana, pursuing digital fanaticism. But anywhere he ended, he then became one of those that we must fear to becoming closer to our public purse. Corruption, corruption, corruption. We are all aware of the infamous Ghana Post GPS. We are aware of the interoperability that has won the fame as the most expensive interoperability across the world. But even then, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia is still talking digitization and formalization of our economy. And so today it is important to appreciate the topic that has been chosen by the organizers of this program. And that is to look at the state of the Ghanaian economy, the myths and the truth. Your Excellency, your track record has become an albatross on the neck of the NPP. As hard as they try, they are unable to match that track record. As I listen to Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia deliver yet another inglorious lecture, he was at pains to describe this ineffective and inefficient management as efficient management of the Ghanaian expenditure regime. I want to show a table here that will demonstrate to you the kind of fiscal mess that we are in. Just roll over. Okay, so this was yesterday when we reverted to where we belong, the worst performing currency in Africa. Then, as if that was not enough, we became the fourth worst. In fact, we only beat 3 countries in the world. 143 out of 146. But now let's look at the fiscal nightmare. These are the handiworks of Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia. When we were in office, our wage bill stood at 11 billion Ghana cedis. Today, we are looking at 22.8 billion. An expansion of the public sector by 63%. So, Dr. Bawumia, what figures were you cooking for the IMF? Because there's no way IMF will be happy with this level of recklessness. We then spend a large sum of our money again on interest costs. And again, they told us that they were going to reprofile our public debt. And when they did, our interest costs will come down. It is only under Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia that when you reprofile public debt, your interest and the public debt itself balloons. So you see the Walwale Adom Smith's handiwork. Now take the subtotal and consider our total tax revenue. We are spending almost 94% of our tax revenue just to pay 2 line items. Then when you consider the payment of statutory funds, the entire money is finished, including what the donors gave to us for infrastructure. That one too, we spend it on goods and services, on these items. In the end, we are now dealing with a situation where almost everything, look at the numbers. In fact, we now need to borrow in order to meet our consumption expenditure. And this is how Dr. Bawumia describes as efficient expenditure management. I doubt if it wasn't efficient, what we would have been seeing. You will notice that goods and services, look at the numbers. We are now spending, as at the end of 2018, in fact, we are spending more on goods and services than we are spending on capital expenditure. Your Excellency, you did 7.7 billion expenditure in capital in your last year. 2 years put together, they can't come near your 1 year performance. The end result is that I want Dr. Baumia to take this home. A very basic measure of efficiency of delivering projects is that you must spend more on goods and services to deliver more capital expenditure. And so we look at the rate of goods and services as a percentage of your capital expenditure to determine how efficient you are. And you'll notice that in their first year, that percentage moved from 40%. Now we are roaming around 109%. So the people who are roaming around the project are more than the project. So they are chopping around the project, and the project is not being delivered. So you see capital expenditure has declined to 4.7 from 6.3. At this rate, it will take Ghana the next 50 years to build infrastructure and improve our competitiveness. Dr. Mahmoud Baumia, this is not what the people of Ghana voted you for. To be spending our money on chinchinga and kebabs and buying papers to run the office. No. If you look at where we are now, you will now realize that we need to now borrow even in order to now fund what we call the goods and services itself. So Ghana is borrowing not to build infrastructure. We are borrowing to pay salaries. We are borrowing to pay interest rates, interest costs. We are borrowing to pay for goods and services. When it comes to infrastructure, there's nothing left. And Adom Smith from Walwali says this is efficient expenditure management. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a laughing matter. These are very, very serious matters. The rising fiscal cost of our country tells us that we don't have space in our budget to fund the critical and badly needed infrastructure that will move Ghana forward into the next generation. So we are not building schools, we are not building hospitals, we are not building our roads, we are not providing potable water to our people. When you ask Dr. Mahmoud Baumia, he says we should look for the primary surplus. The children, when they are going to school, they go into the primary surplus to go and learn. So this is the state of our fiscal environment. But you understand this because in 2015, when we had the challenges were not born out of incompetence. The challenges were not born out of inability to manage our economy. The challenges were born essentially out of a global financial turmoil that eventually recovered and led to a strengthening of the Chinese and the American economy. And in the end, when these economies were struggling to then keep pace with development and were beginning to slow in their growth, they had to lower the demand they had for our cocoa. And we all know, the lesser the demand, what happens? The price collapses. They had no incentive to buy gold, and will only buy gold as a store of wealth if you were willing to accept a cut price. Our oil output, even though had stumbled because of the problem we had with the turret building, we had the challenge of getting a good price. And I do recall that our own venerable Minister for Finance at the time, just 2 months after starting the implementation of the 2015 budget, had to rush to Parliament to deliver an emergent statement to Parliament. The statement was simply that we had lost so much that if we didn't act, Ghana was already going to lose $700 million from the export of oil that would have gone into funding our ABFA. Under the circumstances, the country was strained. These were external shocks. You cannot tell me that John Dramani Mahama controls the price of cocoa. Neither can you tell me that the NDC controls the price of gold, or we control the dynamics of the global market environment. And this brought a sustained pressure on our own external vulnerabilities. The country began to see a situation where we were not generating enough forex in order to support the cedi, and our balance of payment began to wane. We did not go to IMF to collect money to fund the budget. We went to IMF to help us stabilize the cedi through balance of payment support. What that meant was that anytime IMF released money to us, it was meant to go and increase our buffers. That is why Bawumia must understand that when you are now risking their money, they must be complaining why you want to pump their 980 million recklessly into the market when the aim was to use that to build the buffers. Ladies and gentlemen, it became very apparent that by the time the NDC was exiting office with the IMF, we needed to take a raft of measures in order to improve the economic circumstances of our country. We believe that as a member of the IMF, which had an interest in ensuring global stability, we are in all of this together with the IMF as a global player. We brought the IMF in order to assure the international community that the challenges we were facing were not self-inflicted, but that it was based on the external exogenous variables, and to rely on the technical expertise of the IMF to help us navigate this dangerous situation. Mr. President, you will recall that at the heart of the negotiation of our IMF program, we also agreed that there was a need for us to strengthen our financial sector, but we also agreed that we needed to strengthen our capacity to generate enough domestic resources in order to be self-reliant and develop our own country without resort to too much external support. As we speak today, the reverse is the case. We are all over the place with cap in hand, not just borrowing, but actually celebrating when we have borrowed. Mr. President, the end result of all of this is that Ghana now finds itself in a very difficult financial situation. One of the key drivers of the IMF program was for Ghana to reduce what we call rigidities in our budget and be able to create the fiscal space to fund infrastructure. As a result of that, measures were taken to ensure that at any point in time, we had enough resources available to fund the capital budget and to fund social services, and social protection became a cross-cutting theme in His Excellency's government. We'll recall that he was the one who realigned the Ministry of Women and Children's Affairs to become the Ministry of Women, Children's Affairs, and Social Protection in order to give hope to the thousands of Ghanaians that were below the poverty line. Only recently, the IMF gave a very damning pronouncement on how we have managed our fiscal space. But unfortunately, our people who cannot read and write and yet claim that we cannot read and write were celebrating what was actually a funeral dirge that was given to them by the IMF. The IMF said, even though you have tried to achieve fiscal consolidation, you have done that through the crude method. The crude method is that you have continuously starved the people of Ghana in order to save money at the bank. And so the deficit that you are showing is born out of hardship, is born out of delaying infrastructure, it is born out of making sure that the forward march in order for us to join the elite communities in the world was being postponed. As a result, the IMF says they were very worried about your low rate of revenue generation. But you see, another thing you will find yesterday with Adom Smith was that Adom Smith simply said the wages and salary we are complaining about is not a problem because it is only a certain percentage of the GDP. Is the GDP for you? Can you use the GDP to fund the budget? The GDP is only relevant to the extent that you can mobilize the resources from it to fund this expenditure. So, if you keep talking about, oh, it's not too much, it's about only some percentage of GDP, how come you are not collecting that GDP? You are doing 15.6% since you came to power, but you are growing your public sector alone by 63%. When we talk, you say it's debt to GDP. Go and collect the GDP and fund the budget. So, at the end of the day, what our colleague Adom Smith must know is that it is good to use GDP as a measure. But if you cannot collect the money, don't dream about GDP. You must be able to improve the proportion of the GDP that you are able to generate as revenue in order to fund critical expenditures. So merely relating GDP is simply saying that you have decided that, oh, for me, the numbers look too bad. I don't want to look at it. I'll console myself with the number to GDP. But one day you wake up and realize that you have borrowed so much, you are now struggling to report the true figure of your debt. So the IMF was also worried about a major failure of the government. I mentioned rigidities and inflexibilities. There are certain actions when you take, they become expenditures that you have no discretion over. And therefore, they tie your hands in deciding how you use those monies in order to determine the path of growth and development. One of which the NPP is fond of doing, which the IMF warned them, is that they are just going around looking, okay, get fund. This money, can't we, the Ashanti say, Adongo and Ambwa. Let's go and give it to some people and borrow 30 years. So they come, get fund. 30% of get fund flows, we are going to take $1.5 billion. So it means that for successive generations, if we begin to see a drop in revenues from get fund, we'll be saddled with debt repayment, we'll be saddled with interest costs, and at the end of the day, the original purpose of building get fund, which was to fund infrastructure in the education system, will be gone. Adom Smith, what do you want to do this to future generations? They then get up and say, mineral royalties are the mines. Let's mortgage it and take $750 million for the next 10 years. As if that is not enough, they say it appears we have some diamond buried underground. Let's assume that that diamond is of good quality and we can mine it. So let's go and take money on account of the diamond that is still buried on the ground. Today, if they are listening, I want to tell them, the reason why that Sino-Hydro transaction has not been classified as a public debt is not because it's leverage on bauxite. No. It is because there's nothing to owe. Sino-Hydro has not delivered a kilometer of road, so how can you owe it? But immediately they deliver the road and the deferred payment kicks in, we owe. It will become part of our public debt. That is another rigidity in our budget. So these are a group of people, instead of finding alternative ways to mobilize the revenue, all they believe in is we cannot raise the revenue. So let's borrow against the future, and when we leave, Ghana can best. We don't care. Precisely what Adom Smith and his people are doing to us. Mr. Chairman, the other thing I want us to look at is a very damning situation in terms of our business and economic environment. Only recently, the Merchant Bank of South Africa released the ranking of where to invest in Africa. During the tiring effort of His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, the least we ever got was a 4th, and by 2018, we came to 5th. Your Excellency, at some point in time, we were 3rd on the list of investor destinations in Africa. And due to your tireless effort to improve the economic environment by leveraging our resources to improve infrastructure and improve competitiveness, Ghana was seen as a safe haven for investment. Today, as we speak, we have declined from the 5th to the 9th. We are at risk of falling out of the top 10. Out of the top 10 investment destinations in Africa. I'm sure if I was Baumia, I don't think I'll get an erection when I go home. But this man is singing praises for this kind of disgrace. Every day we wake up, we hear international disgrace for Ghana. We are now on the verge of exiting the top 10 investment destination. And as a matter of fact, the reasons given for where we are is a testament to the hard work of the NDC under his leadership, John Dramani Mahama. They have indicated that efficient infrastructure is the backbone for leveraging investment and for creating sustainable opportunities for the people. And so your vision to transform Ghana through infrastructure development that was laughed at today makes you the son that was rejected, but will become the stone that the builders rejected, but will become the head of the cornerstone. We are told that whilst our competing neighbors, Ivory Coast and the rest, are improving in terms of economic and business environment, we have stagnated and declined. That is a verdict of RMB. How can you celebrate this? That you are in class, you are in P6, they are promoting your colleagues to Form 1, you are still there celebrating in P6. Now it gets to a point that they realize that even the people who come to join you are better, so you deserve to go to P4. And Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia is celebrating this performance. But Mr. President, another disturbing factor that has rocked this country, and which I've already explained, is the fact that we are increasingly spending the hard-earned monies that we borrow on consumption. And here, if I can see the table on our Eurobond utilization. Can somebody help? Okay, I think we can go ahead when it comes. The Eurobonds that we borrowed, yes, you can see it here. This is how we use our Eurobonds. The ones, so no wonder they were celebrating with Kenke. The Kenke will end up in the consumption. The fish that they were paying for, it will end up here. I'm sure yesterday after Bawumia finished, there was a reception. It will end up here with our Eurobond. So in 2018, we went to borrow $750 million. We spent only $119 million on capital expenditure, $631 million we spent on consumption. Our children will have to come and pay for this. And they have nothing to show. If you take 2019, the $2 billion, the $3 billion they borrowed, $2 billion is for the budget. Only $390 million will be spent on capital expenditure. $1.61 billion will go into family and friends. You know it. So Ghana has moved from an era where we're borrowing to build into our future. When we're borrowing to create prosperity for children yet unborn. When we're borrowing to build the rich hospital, they said we're incompetent. When we borrowed to build Terminal 3, they said we're incompetent. When we borrowed to build regional hospitals across the country, they said we were incompetent. Now that they are borrowing to pay for kenke and fish, what will they be? So the people of Ghana must wake up. Because this cannot be sustained. And we cannot go on the path of building up debt and not having anything to show for it. I'd like us to take a look at the financial sector challenges that we have. And here I'm particularly interested because since the crisis occurred, we in the NDC have not fully told our story. And so as a result, all the mishandling and incompetence of dealing with the financial sector appears to be finding its way onto our doorstep. But today, we have to tell our story. During the era of the NDC as part of the IMF program, one of the things that we signed up to deal with was to address the financial sector challenges. Your Excellency, your team was very focused in addressing this in a way that did not provide social dislocation, but that ensured that we had a financial sector that was broad in leverage, but that also supported Ghanaian entrepreneurship as a means of keeping our own businesses in our hands. At the time, the managers of the central bank decided to engage in a number of activities in order to strengthen the financial sector and make the sector very robust. These actions range from fiscal reforms to legal reforms and to clearly intervening in managing the capital adequacies that were existing. And so the NDC government recruited KPMG and Pricewaterhouse to do what we call the asset quality review to give us a sense of where we were with our financial sector. Your Excellency, at the time, it became very clear when we got the report that we needed to validate that report one more time. And so we recruited another firm, the same group of people, to go back in 2016 and validate the numbers. They came back with the same report that several financial institutions or banks, a number of them, were having challenges to do with the financial sector challenges. Ladies and gentlemen, the report made it quite clear that some of the challenges emanated from the energy sector SOE's debt on the books of the banks. Some returned saying that the SMEs had also burdened the financial sector. And some of the reasons we got was that we needed to improve corporate governance and improve the institutional arrangement to ensure that reforms in the banking sector were anchored. As a result, we took pragmatic steps to address these holistically. I know my good friend, Honorable Atufosin, shepherded a number of bills that became laws in order to reform the banking sector. We put together a sustainable law called the Banking and Special, Deposit-Taking Institutions Act, 1930. This was to address weaknesses in the legal framework for making sure that the central bank had proper grip on the banking sector, but also to give the central bank powers that it didn't have, that it needed to have. So those lawyers on the other side, who when they see anything that was done, will just pick the Act 930 and blame NDC. Tell them Act 930 was passed somewhere around October 2016, and laws are not applied retroactively. So if something happened in the banking sector like we found with the Capital Bank in 2015, it is the reason we had to pass a new law to address those specific challenges that we had found that needed to be addressed. Again, we realized that the Bank of Ghana itself needed some autonomy and needed to strengthen its own corporate governance systems. So we amended the Bank of Ghana Act in order to give it more flexibility and give it a better corporate governance image. Mr. Chairman, we also agreed that there was a need as a country to protect small depositors. And so we passed the Deposit Protection Act in order to give meaning to the protection of savings of our people, so that things that happen, like happened with DKM, would have been easily addressed through that provision. But we didn't end there. We realized that we needed to take a very strong fiscal action. And so we promulgated and came to Parliament and got the Energy Sector Levies Act passed. This was to provide flows of money in order to fund the energy sector SOEs in order to reduce their debt in the banking sector, provide liquidity to the banking sector, and clean up the balance sheet for them to be on their own in the SOEs. Our colleagues resisted us to the hilt, but once we believed in our course of action, we survived it. Today, they are not only using it, they are mortgaging it for the next 10 years with a bond. I recall also that a decision was taken to pursue the option of raising bonds to pay for the debt that government owed to SMEs. Together, these two activities were to generate about 8 billion Ghana cedis that would have enabled the banks to capitalize with their own money without having to go down like they have done. But we also believe that it was important to introduce minimum capital in order to strengthen the capital base of our banks. In this regard, Mr. President, your team worked very hard to ensure that we agreed a minimum capital requirement of 230 million, not 400 million, and there was a reason. We agreed that not all banks require the same capital. And so whilst we provided a base of 230 million, we will then work with individual banks to determine their levels of risk and be able to determine the appropriate capital that that particular bank needs in order to have small and big banks operate in a risk-free environment. We call that the internal capital assessment, project, which was meant to enable us actually handhold the banks and work with them to come out of the challenges and not to collapse them at the least excuse. And so, fast forward, when we lost power, these people took over. When they took over, it was talk of war between shareholders, directors, and banks. They introduced a minimum capital, and they were so impatient they couldn't wait for the time to come. So anytime they look at the watch, how many days are we left? So we're left 4 months. Let's go and tell them that it's left 4 months. Oh. And when they do that, of course, depositors become alarmed. So they go and take the monies from the bank, and the banks become weaker. So the end result is that the country had to go through a very difficult period of this exercise. The end result of this is that as a poor country as us, we have so far, by the end of 2019, we would have spent 20.46 billion. 20.46 billion would have spent by this country by 2019 just to collapse the banks. And we were in search of how much capital. Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia tells us that the capital that we gleaned out of this was about 4 billion. I have a table that will show you that out of that money, only 2 billion was what we realized from fresh injection. The other was sitting on the books of the banks who just transferred to their capital. So in search of 4 billion, as per Bawumia's figures, we spent 20.46 billion to look for 4 billion. Adom Smith, even in his peers, in those days, they would have sacked him from Ghana before he destroys the country. But we are in a democracy, so we can't do that. But we also realize that even in an attempt to address this problem, there was serious political victimization. Some people were described in various forms in order to take their banks. We are aware of the instance of Heritage Bank where they said once you have a case in court, they must as well declare that you are not fit and proper. We recall that they said somebody has about 60 or 70% in a bank, and so the bank is overexposed to that person. But I have on authority somebody who has 99% of a bank, with his wife holding 1%. And that bank is still alive. So the challenge we have had with our banking sector is not just the fact that it has eroded confidence, but the performance. And I want to show a video here, a chart. It will show you clearly that, Your Excellency, your banking sector that you left is the envy of today. Okay, so these are the bank's capitalization. They transferred 2.4 billion straight from their books. They didn't bring anything. You can go to the next one. Yes, this is the fresh injection that came, 2.2 billion. So where is Bawumia getting the 4 billion from? This is all we got as cash. And I've shown you all the banks. You can verify. Let's move to the next slide. And so this is a sign, a bar chart of basically showing the composition of our recapitalization. But this is it. Look at the amounts of money that I have indicated against the collapse of the banks. 2019, we are projecting to spend 6.14 billion more. In fact, the total for 2019 is 8.5 billion more to be wasted on collapsing financial institutions. So a country that cannot provide printed material for students to write exams before they go home, and they are now learning through the chalkboard. This is what we are doing with our money. Interest component alone will amount to 20 billion in 10 years. In 10 years, our children will pay 40.48 billion Ghana cedis from this reckless activity. Couldn't you have saved all these banks with this money? But where are we? This is what we have done. Somebody must explain what exactly is the motive behind this. This cannot be a reform. But let's go to the next slide. I think you left that one at the top. The one that is showing the banking sector performance. You have to go back. If you can go back. Go back, let me see. Yes. Your Excellency, the blue line is your performance. The red line is Adom Smith's performance. Who can go and bring Adom Smith's children to come and show us the one they like? I am sure they will pick the blue one. So you can see the asset growth. we were growing at an astronomical level with the weaknesses. Advances, we were doing so well. Almost every indicator, even non-performing loans, you will see that we're doing 17%, they are still doing 18% something percent. But do you know why they are getting the 18%? You see, if you are a student at a university, and you get A, and you get 1C, what happens to you? What happens to your grade point? You will become a third-class student, right? So when you remove the C, what happened? You are a first-class student, right? So they have removed all the C. In our own, the C's are still there. All the banks that they collapse are the C's. In order to shore up, we still have the weak banks in there, and this is our performance. So they should stop telling people that they have created a strong, solid, and sound banking system. No. The facts don't speak for this. And we can't spend that kind of money to be in this mess. I'd like to move on and look at a major part of our situation today, which is what we call the external sector vulnerabilities. I'm trying to jump a lot of things because time is not on our side. There is a major challenge to our country today, and that is the fact that our vulnerability has elevated beyond the 2015 levels. And I'll explain what I mean by that. If you look at, I think somebody showed the gross international reserves earlier. If you can go back to it. Your reserves, your gross reserves, gives you an indication of the size of your forex economy. It tells you the possible obligation that you would get if people decide to reverse these flows back to where they came from. And so when you have a lot of people, currencies that are sitting in your country that is not for you, you have to build buffers in order to safeguard a sudden reversal of those flows so that you are protected. That is why we build reserves. So you will notice that in 2015, when we had the height of the challenge, our gross, and these are in billions of dollars, our gross international reserves was about 5.8 billion. By 2016, we had grown that gross international reserve by about 4.7%. And then by 2022, it had increased by 22%. And you know why? You see, in economic policy, it is not possible to plant a tree and go and harvest tomorrow. Is that not it? You plant, it bears fruit after a year or two. So by 2017, the pass-through effect of our programs in 2015, 2016 was still working. They had now started the process of unwinding our policies and introducing their own incompetent policies. By 2018, when their incompetent policies now set in, look at where we were. We're now growing negative 7%. So Ghana's cover was being blown. Our net international reserve numbers from 2015 was 3.18. And one of the measures of your ability to withstand shocks is the rate at which you accumulate your reserves and net reserves from your gross reserves. So if you have 10 cedis and you can save 50 cedis, you are better than somebody who can save only 10 cedis for a rainy day. So you see that in 2015, even all the difficulties, our build-up was about 54% of our gross. We increased it to 56%, and again, like I explained, our policies were still working. You had 60%. When their policies, the incompetent Adom Smith policies started working, we'll move from 60% to 47%. Now, that 47% is worse than what we had in 2015 when we had the challenges. And we have not yet experienced even one shock. You see, look at the depreciation. As we built the reserves and we improved our rate of build-up, you notice that the cedi was beginning to slow in depreciation up to 4.9. When their incompetent policies set in, you see where the cedi is. It has recovered back because it was no longer covered. You see, there are Manchester United supporters here, right? Is it tomorrow that you are playing Barcelona? Good. David De Gea is a very good goalkeeper, isn't it? David De Gea is a cedi. But David De Gea is useless as a goalkeeper without a defense. Not just a defense, but you must strengthen the fitness level of your defense. So the net international reserve is our defense. And as we grow it from 54 to 56 to 60, we are building the fitness of our defenders to protect the city. So suddenly, our fitness level is dropping. Our defenders are becoming weak. The hair will be collecting balls from the net as if we're playing cricket match. So you see where the city is. It is not by chance. The numbers and the data show that this is a reflection of the fundamentals of our economy. And yesterday, I saw somebody struggling to swallow what? I couldn't get it. He said it's about external shocks. Since when did that become a factor? So, Adom Smith, this is your terminal report. Mr. President, when you were the coach of Ghana, this is what you did for Manchester United. Adom Smith has reduced Manchester United to Stoke City. And when you ask him, he's celebrating because that is the level of his competence. We can't force him. But, Mr. President, the picture is very, very gloomy. You need to understand the dynamics of your external environment in order to fashion out appropriate monetary policy stance to anchor this. You see, when they came, they said you were incompetent. They started reducing interest rates. Is that not it? Yes. Fine. Policy rate cut. Policy rate cut. There's a table. If you can go to that table, I'll show His Excellency something. If I can get that table. Mr. President, when you are managing monetary policy, you have to address the concerns of several stakeholders and constituents that have interest in the country. And so in a situation where you have a lot of foreigners having a lot of stake in your economy, monetary policy must address their sentiments. Otherwise, they will collapse your economy and your city. Only a few days ago, I heard the central bank, when he was asked a question, say that he doesn't take monetary policy decisions because of, foreigners. But let's look at this. Just look at this picture. Our domestic debt. Foreign investors are holding 30% of our domestic debt. If you add that to the external debt below of 21,650, you get about 27.2 billion of our debts are in the hands of foreigners. They constitute 68% of our total debt portfolio. These are in foreign currency. If these people are angry today, and they move the money, we are dead. You see, and you say you don't care about these people. After you have handed our economy to foreigners, you are not saying you don't care about them. They will show you. So that is the level of our vulnerability. We are 68% dependent in our decision-making on the sentiment of the foreign investor. In fact, Ave Analytic indicated in a recent survey that Ghana is a safe country with the worst vulnerability to foreign sentiments. Adom Smith must understand this. The Bank of Ghana governor must understand this before he cut our policy rate to kill the country. So when I keep asking him to make sure that your policy rates are anchoring the vulnerabilities of our country, this is exactly what I mean. If you look at our debt to GDP, you see the debt there, I will show you how I got it. Take the Monetary Policy Committee's summary of economic and financial data. And that is the data Baumia used. Because Baumia was coming to do a lecture, they stopped our public debt in December. And when they stopped in December, after the, what do they call that thing? After the domestic debt, they reported up to March. But after the external one, they stopped in December. But they remembered that they had borrowed 3.7 billion, which they added to their reserve and showed that the reserve is high. So me too, I added it. And when I added it appropriately, based on the old series, our debt to GDP is 58%, but Obia reported 48%. And for this 58%, I actually picked it from Bank of Ghana. If you take the old series, when we had no rebates, if we were going to go without a rebase, Ghana's debt to GDP would have been 72%. We are back to the election year, and we have not yet had an election under them. So, Adom Smith, are you seeing these numbers or you are seeing something else? That is the reason they are cooking the numbers and they are not reporting the full extent of our debt. But, Mr. President, what is even worse apart from this is that we are now beginning to see over-concentration of our external debt. What it means is that only a few people are now holding our external debt, and Ghana's destiny is tied to the Franklin Templetons and 2-3 other investors. So the whole of 2016, we woke up one day and Franklin Templeton came in $2 billion, and we're laughing. We're adding to our vulnerability and concentration risk. In that year alone, they did tap issue of 25 billion Ghana cedis. That is just calling a friend and giving him bonds, 25 billion. So apart from having this challenge, that has to be addressed in order to give Ghana independence in terms of policy making and in terms of our ability to manage the vulnerabilities of our country. We are now dependent on 2 or 3 investors who can manage us like kids. If they decide that their interest is now better served in Southeast Asia and they come to take their money, the city will disappear. This is the state of our Ghanaian economy. And this is not the one to be celebrating. But only recently they came to celebrate what they call the hat trick. Mr. President, that was a hat trick of embarrassment. You see, the first one is that they were celebrating the stability of the city. How can you celebrate something that had just, you see somebody is sick, you take him to the hospital, you inject him, you don't even have the cure. He comes so he gets better for 1 week, and you say you have stabilized, you are coming to celebrate. The next morning, the person dies. So, at the time they were celebrating, the city was secretly climbing back to where it belongs. And now we are back to our record. The worst performing currency, not just in Africa, but the 4th worst in the whole world. And we were celebrating this embarrassment with kinky and fish. Mr. President, the next embarrassment that we saw was that we were celebrating because we went to borrow. But it was not because we went to borrow. You see, let me tell you something about these people. And Your Excellency, you know this. When a country is in a funded program, you are on an IMF program, and you are looking to go and borrow money in the market, and the IMF is going to sit, executive board is going to sit on your case, you wait for them to finish because any positive news will give you a reduction in your coupon. It feeds confidence into the market. Is that not what you do? So how come these people knew IMF was going to sit on the 20th and they borrowed on the 19th? Have you asked that question? Somebody is going to tell the whole world that you have done so well that they should give money to you at a lower price. Because you know the verdict is going to be terrible, you decide to do it quickly before you are found out. And then you come and celebrate this one. But, Mr. Chairman, the irony of all of this is that a country as small as Benin went on the Eurobond market a few days before us and borrowed 500 million euros, oversubscribed by 4 times, and they got 5.6% interest rate. Mr. Speaker, a few days before we borrowed, Bloomberg reported that Côte d'Ivoire decided not to go ahead with this bond program because the interest rate was high. When we checked, it was 5.6% that our neighbors said it was too high. We went and gave 8.9%. And you say it is oversubscribed. Who doesn't chase for cheaper things? If you take your bonds and they are so cheap, you are giving free money of about 3% more, which investor will not come? In fact, they were running over each other because they had found this lame antelope that was available to be hunted. And after you have been hunted and you manage to escape, the next moment they hear that you are celebrated. They are now waiting for you for your next born. They didn't know that 8.9 was cheap. How can we do this to ourselves? And it was also because they knew that a few days' time we were going to win another award. That award was actually coming from no other person than the United Nations, who were declared as the only country in West Africa to be at risk of death distress. Your Excellency, the country that you left that was in safe hands is now about to enter the international mortuary. Chances are that we may have to sell our illness to the international community to forgive us because we can't pay. We are the second in the whole of Africa. Why do we keep scoring these goals? And then when we finish, we celebrate it. So how many have I mentioned? Mr. President, I think I have taken quite a lot of time. I'll try to wind up, even though there are a lot of issues. The country at this point in time is on crossroads. We are confronted with a very severe fiscal environment that is creating a quagmire for us. We have come to a point where we have left the IMF without achieving the objectives of the IMF program. As a matter of fact, the IMF at a point got tired with that and said, you are a very difficult student, you can't even pass, go. But Mr. Chairman, the risk of it all is that the managers of the economy don't seem to know where they are. And that is a much, much bigger problem than the fact that we have a problem. It is my wish and my hope that with your able leadership and your commitment to hard work, which you have demonstrated over the years, the National Democratic Congress will return to save Ghana from collapse. But whilst we work for the people of Ghana to bring us to power, we are interested in the good of Ghana. We will not come back to power because the NPP has failed, no. We will come back to power because we have superior programs and our track record will speak for us. And so in the meantime, we'll recommend to government to urgently consider the recommendations of the IMF in order to save this country from collapse. We want to encourage the government, even as it pursues the option of improving the lives of our importers, which we strongly support because we have always fought them about this. We believe that the reasons given to be able to find the additional revenue to plug that loophole is untenable. In fact, Mr. President, Adom Smith says that when he reduces his import duty, traffic that was going to a free port in Togo, a free port will be directed to our port because at least they'll pay something. Hey! Who has ever left free and come to pay something? So, Adom Smith, your reason for plugging the loophole is a sign of fiscal recklessness. And you must think about it and think about it well because you have brought these importers to this level. They were not here. You began to manipulate your benchmark rates and you yourself admitted that you are now 200% more than others. So if you want to address your ills, address them. But don't do that in a populist manner, especially when we know that the announcement you have made will lead to almost nothing in some instances, and in many of the cases, negligible. My only fear is that we will be back to the 2017 budget at Abosokan. But you see, they have managed the expectations of the people. And then 2020, they'll come and, he will come and promise everything again. Please, the people of Ghana, whilst I wind up, Minuanuma Moha and Comodie and ye Comotinti Bia, Yenua Penny Ghana Shenisa. Onona oye Osia Dio. Ghana, say, a Kohuma Beko ya, a Onwa. Yamia Adom 2016. No, I say ono na awiase na onima de eche obia eka Ghana sikasem ho. Ye de na ba. Ye de ne ba ye no masetre mutem sen. And so enra oba no obo se on say ye on susuye ye say akotre say ofridua so be bofom na obi ambo na ba so ono abebo na ba so. Entendo amobo ma ba so na nsema ye kan nyina ne say wo hwe sikasem no a enkoyie. Sesi anim guase na omde adare da bia be sori bia ye se Ghana ye ne ye last bibim. Ye se sikasem anhwe a nanse ya hwe kura be frɛ amansan na oma ba bebo anya sa ye ntimi hwe man. Mo nyina so munim adwumaden a NDC edebo a Ghana. Enti enne ye pese Ghana fo hu nsusua eda NDC amamuo mu ene nsusua eda NPP amamuo. Onim se NDC me menye nipa bia o NDC ye ka akukuda mo NDC a me shabontin o. Omokura nya mpie mai. Enti se ka so mo mema no wo he na sesi a maje edwom afei. Sesi a o ma say esikasem. Enti ye bompa ye se afei ebe mumia moni na yentu sankofo enfranya sa ye madache enkoni ye maya ye da masibo be.
Your Excellency, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? After that beautiful ode to the Wale Adom Smith, we would immediately proceed to the second part of this afternoon's program. I would at this stage invite the Honorables Atuforsen, John Jinapo, Monakote, Fifi Kwete, and Professor Nana Jane Opokwajiman to join me upstage.
This is the Draw News channel, and we are bringing you that reaction to the Vice President's town hall meeting yesterday. The NDC is reacting to it. They've taken some of the issues and tried to punch some holes in there. We've heard, for example, the reaction to the port reforms or the slash in the benchmark rates that we heard, and it was addressed by Isaac Adongo, the first part of this program, and we understand that there's going to be a panel that's going to do the second part. But before that starts, I've got Northern Aqua Hayford with me. He's with our business desk, an editor there, and we've been listening to this together, and so just a few points that we've gathered from this submission by Mr. Adongo.
I think that one of the things that he talked about, the deferred payments issue, he felt that is a key rigidity as far as our economy is concerned. He raised the issue of government mortgaging some of our natural resources for funds, which he felt that wasn't good. I mean, it's one kind of rigidity within the budget. We shouldn't be doing that. I mean, we have to, as a country, take our time and ensure that we develop these resources. He also raised issue with capital expenditure, and he felt that even in terms of infrastructural development, as far as this NPP government is concerned, it's been very low, and that they, as NDC at the time, did a very good job with that one. He also spoke about the Where to Invest report from the RMB guys.
Let me